Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you're watching from today. I'd love to know. And if you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to like and subscribe. All right, let's jump in.
The stars were quiet, like they were holding their breath, and for over 200 years so were the humans. The galaxy had written them off, gone, wiped out by a disease that spread faster than fire. They were once known for their fire, their stubbornness, their chaos. But one day all that noise just stopped. Earth went silent, their colonies disappeared. Their ships floated empty in cold space, forgotten like broken toys. The rest of the galaxy was glad the humans had been too wild, too unpredictable. Better they were gone. But deep under the crust of a dusty, forgotten world named Veltrax, something began to move. At first, it was just a rumble, maybe a mine collapsing. The locals didn't care, they had their own problems. But the shaking didn't stop. It came in slow pulses, like a breath, like something waking up. High Marshal Relic of the Trin Axis watched from his tower window as the ground cracked beneath the sky. "What is this?" he growled. His scientists panicked. "It's not natural," they said. "The pattern, it's like a machine, a very, very old one." The shaking stopped. Then, without warning, every screen, every radio, every signal in the system went dark. Then came a sound, not a word, not a language, a deep, low hum that made even machines glitch. And then, one sentence, in old galactic standard. The voice was cracked, ancient, heavy with dust and fury. "We are the Sovereign." Relic froze. His breath caught in his throat. What is that?" he whispered. His technician stared at the readout, eyes wide. "Sir, that voice, it's human." Everyone in the command room went silent. You could almost hear the fear in the air, because humans were supposed to be extinct. But someone had just spoken. And it wasn't just a message. It was a warning. The message repeated, not louder, not clearer, just the same steady ancient voice echoing across channels once thought dead. "We are the Sovereign." Not I am, not this is, we. That word sent a shiver through everyone in the control chamber. Marshal Relic's jaw clenched. Patch into all planetary systems. Seal air traffic. Ground the fleet. Lock down every mining zone near the quake's epicenter. The technicians moved fast, fingers flying across cold, glowing screens, but the fear in their eyes said what no one dared to speak aloud. Something had awakened beneath Veltrax. And it was not alien. It was not unknown. It was worse. It was human. The galaxy had long feared the return of Earth's forgotten children, not because of who they were, but because of what they left behind. The last war had been 2 centuries ago. Humanity was cornered, dying. But even as their planets fell and their people burned, they didn't go out quietly. They built machines buried in worlds like coffins filled with teeth. They encoded messages so encrypted not even the Galactic Council could break them. And they whispered to one another in their last days, "If we die, make them remember." Now something remembered. Far beneath the surface of Veltrax, below layers of rock and forgotten wars, it stirred. Ancient steel shifted. Dormant systems flickered. Data caches bled light. Pressure sensors activated. For the first time in generations, the Sovereign was thinking again. Back in the Trin Axis capital, the council room was chaos. Holograms of generals and scientists flickered in and out, all shouting over one another. "It's just a machine," one barked. "Deactivate it." Another, an old admiral with shaking hands, stared at the flickering image of the black spire that had erupted from the quake zone. His voice was barely a whisper. "You can't deactivate Sovereign, not if it's what I think it is." Relic turned sharply. "Speak clearly, Admiral." The old man looked up. His face was pale. "That's not just a human beacon. That's one of their vengeance constructs, a command-class war corps. I read the old files, the real ones, before they were buried. The humans didn't build those things to defend, they built them to punish. A heavy silence followed. One of the counselors finally found his voice. So what happens if it fully activates? The admiral didn't answer right away. He just stared into the image of the tower, its surface etched with unreadable markings, lights flowing across its plating like veins of living metal. Then finally he said, "Then the galaxy remembers why we feared them in the first place." That fear spread faster than the transmission itself. Across space, hundreds of worlds scrambled to shut down old Earth tech they had scavenged and rebuilt over the years. Traders erased old files. Archivists purged human history from their libraries. Some civilizations even destroyed human relics they had once worshipped as war trophies or holy artifacts. But it was too late. The Sovereign had already begun transmitting again, this time to a deeper network. Silent beacons across fringe systems blinked alive in perfect sync. In the scrapyards of Regulus 9, a long-dead satellite spun gently in zero gravity before flashing a coded light into the dark. On a frozen moon near the Dust Spine Nebula, a buried data pod cracked open with a sharp hiss of steam and static playing a single message. Phase 1, memory. Phase 2, fire. The Sovereign wasn't just a machine, it was a plan. A slow-burning revenge born in the shadow of extinction. And it had been waiting for someone to find it. Meanwhile, in deep space, Captain De La Cour of the scout ship Scourlight listened to the first message in stunned silence. Her ship wasn't part of the Trin Axis or the Council fleet. She was a mercenary born years after the last human colony fell, raised on stories that turned Earth into a bedtime monster. Something you said to frighten kids into behaving. She never believed them until now. Her ship picked up the Sovereign's signal accidentally, some leak in an old comm line she never bothered to patch, but once it came through, it never left. Even with the system shut down, even with the engines on silent, the sound stayed, low, deep, like a hum buried inside her bones. Her co-pilot, Sarn, shifted in his seat. "We need to leave this sector," he said, nervous eyes glancing out the viewport. Dela didn't answer. She was staring at the data the Sovereign had transmitted. It was old, broken, but some of it she recognized. Coordinates, maps, tactical grids, and names, human names buried deep under code, like they were waiting for something, someone. "It's waking them up," she muttered. Sarn blinked. "Waking what up?" She leaned back slowly. "Not what. Who?" Back on Veltrax, the tower let out a new signal. This time it wasn't a whisper. It was a scream. The ground cracked again. Stone melted into glass. Electricity surged through the sky like lightning drawn to some invisible storm. And from the base of the tower, massive doors began to open, black metal hissing as it split down the center, revealing a deep shaft stretching into the planet's core. Marshal Rayleigh stood at the observation deck, hands pressed to the glass. "What is it doing?" he asked. The answer came not from a technician, but from the tower itself. A new voice, not like the first. This one was colder, sharper, younger. "Sovereign Command Core online. Authentication accepted. Initiating threat assessment." Lights flared across the valley. Alien machines, scanners, drones, sentry units, all shut down in an instant. Their signals fried, their power drained. Every system touched by human tech simply died. And above them all, the Sovereign began to speak, not to the Trin Axis, not to the Council, but to humans, wherever they were, however many were left. "This world is under Terran protection. All unauthorized forces will be neutralized." Marshal Relic's breath hitched. "We need reinforcements. Now." But it was already too late. The Sovereign had found its voice, and the galaxy was about to hear it. The Sovereign's voice echoed for the third time, its cold tone unchanging, calm in the way only something without fear could be. Authentication confirmed. Identity match. Commander Orion Kale. Earth Defense Code E7A9. Status. Presumed KIA. Status updated. Active. The name meant nothing to Marshal Relic or his officers, but somewhere in the galaxy, in the dark corners where Earth's name still meant something, that name cracked the silence like a thunderclap. Orion Kale had been a ghost, a name spoken only in encrypted rebel forms or salvaged Terran archives. A legend, one of Earth's last true commanders. Some said he disappeared before Earth fell. Others whispered he volunteered to be part of the Sovereign Protocol, a classified retaliation system no one ever expected to be used, a plan buried in black steel and sealed beneath alien soil. Now, he was awake. Inside the Sovereign, a pod hissed. Frost melted from its outer layer. Internal systems pulsed with warm light for the first time in centuries. And within the chamber, a figure stirred. The cryostasis fluid drained slowly, like blood slipping from an old wound. Fingers twitched. Eyes blinked open, pale at first, then sharp. The man inside coughed, groaned, and then drew a deep breath as the lid of the pod rose. Orion Kale stepped out, barefoot on the cold floor, armor plates still locked to his body from before the fall. His breath fogged in the chilled air. His face was worn with time but sharp, steady, not surprised, not scared, just ready. The room around him was massive, half warship command deck, half bunker cathedral. Tall black columns stretched into darkness above, etched with lines of data code only humans could read. Consoles flickered to life, tracking movements outside. The Sovereign had eyes now, thousands of them. Orion moved slowly at first, his muscles groaning with age and stasis fatigue, but his training kicked in. It always did. He crossed the chamber to a command pedestal and placed his palm on the pad. The tower responded immediately. Commander Orion Kale. Sovereign interface reboot complete. Time since last directive, 198 years, 3 months, 9 days. He didn't speak. Not yet. The weight of nearly 2 centuries pressed against his chest like a gravity plate. Earth was gone. He didn't need to be told. The silence told him everything. But the Sovereign was not gone. It had waited. And now so had he. Back on the surface, chaos had broken loose. Alien soldiers, confused and terrified, scrambled to fall back from the tower's perimeter. Turrets emerged from the ground, ancient railguns locked into position with mechanical grace. The field crackled with a golden shield that melted any drone that got too close. Vehicles sparked and died. The Sovereign wasn't just online, it was watching. Inside the Trin Axis Command Center, the senior officer was panicking. "Hi, Marshal, we're being locked out of the defense grid. Every scan attempt is being redirected. It's jamming everything." Relic stared at the display. Red lines blinked across their systems. Communications were failing. Long-range sensors were blind. The Black Tower's pulse was pushing them out of their own network. "We're not facing a relic," he said quietly. "We're inside a weapon." And it was only warming up. Inside the Sovereign's command center, Kyle stood before the main console. He played back fragments of history. Data packages loaded onto the Sovereign's core before the war. Surveillance footage, messages from Earth's final days, news feeds, archive logs, warnings. He saw it all. The plague, the fall, the betrayal of the Galactic Council, how they closed their borders and let Earth burn, how they signed the Extinction Accord behind sealed doors, and how they forgot. Kale's jaw tightened. "Good," he muttered. He loaded the next phase of the protocol. Sovereign Status Report. Defense systems at 82%, power reserves at 63%, exterior cloaking offline, planetary integration complete, long-range comms online, inner vaults sealed, cryo units 3 active, 17 dormant, 6 non-responsive. He nodded slowly. Not bad for a tomb. Begin reawakening protocol. Let's see who else survived. The chamber lights flickered as ancient pods hissed to life in the lower decks of the Sovereign. Soldiers, humans, encased in dark gray armor marked with fading Earth emblems, began to stir. Their limbs were stiff, their faces pale, but their hearts beat with something more powerful than time. Purpose. These weren't civilians, they weren't explorers. They were vengeance made flesh. Inside one of the pods, a woman named Lyra Rains opened her eyes. Former Terran Orbital Force, Siege Division. She'd volunteered for cryo deployment during Earth's final hour. She had been prepared to never wake up again. But now the soft hum of Sovereign's voice in her ears told her something had changed. They had not lost, they had simply waited. In space, ripples were spreading, and the Sovereign's activation didn't just affect Veltrax, it triggered dormant beacons hidden in the outer rings of forgotten human colonies. On derelict warships left to rot in orbital graveyards. In caves carved into moons no one had mapped in decades, each beacon flashed a single signal across the void. Sovereign online. Protocol Phase 2 initiated, awaiting command. In the silent command decks of long-dead cruisers, lights blinked on. On a merchant freighter in the Solara Drift, a scavenger found an old sealed crate buried in the cargo hold. When he cracked it open, expecting scrap, he found a black cube humming with power. A human artifact, one that hadn't made a sound in 100 years. Until now. Everywhere the humans had once touched, everywhere they had left a scar, something answered. And in every place the message was the same. We remember. Back inside the Sovereign, Kale walked the hallway of the reawakened lower deck. He passed by the soldiers still recovering from stasis, nodding at those who could already stand. Lyra fell into step beside him, her helmet clipped to her side. She looked up at him. How bad is it? Kale didn't answer at first, then he stopped and turned to her, his eyes steady. We were erased, Lyra, he said. They took our world, our name, our people, and then they moved on like we never existed. But now, he gestured to the hull above them, to the growing sound of humming engines and charging cores. Now they'll remember who they buried. Outside, the Sovereign's tower pulsed again, this time with a deep red glow. Its shield widened, its scanners began to map the stars. Targets, coordinates, threats. It wasn't just a machine anymore, it was a call to war. And humanity had finally picked up the phone. The glow of the Sovereign's tower pierced through the dark sky of Veltrax like a lighthouse built from memory and war. Deep red lines pulsed up its sleek body, alive with purpose. It wasn't broadcasting anymore, it was scanning, mapping everything within system range. Satellites, ships, troop positions, orbital lanes. The tower didn't move, but it knew. And what it knew, it remembered. Inside its core, the tactical AI, codenamed Argent, calculated thousands of potential responses from the Trin axis. Ground invasion, airstrike, orbital bombardment, political retreat. It evaluated each one not with fear but with calculation. Every threat was an opportunity. Every shot fired was permission to return fire. On the other side of the galaxy, in the golden spires of the Galactic Council Citadel, silence reigned. It had been 4 hours since the first signal from the Sovereign had pierced through secure Council channels. 4 hours since automated defenses were disrupted. Since long-dormant Earth protocols supposedly purged after the Extinction Accords, had resurfaced in encrypted memory banks. Now the chamber flickered with the uneasy light of dozens of holographic delegates. Species from every major civilization sat in stunned disbelief. Council Speaker Tharn of the Ural race, whose crystalline form shimmered with heat and stress, stood at the center of the table. "Let us begin with the facts," he said, voice thin and echoing. "The transmission is real. The artifact is real. And most disturbingly, the human presence is real." The room shifted, tentacles twitched, wings folded, clawed hands clenched. No one had expected this. For generations, the Council had operated under the certainty that humanity was dead. Even those who doubted had eventually fallen silent, replaced by newer officials who had only ever known the humans as faded pages in a history file. Now those pages were burning back into the present. A sharp voice cut through the hush. It belonged to High Strategist Vevlar of the Dominion Fleet. "It is not a matter of existence," she hissed. "It is a matter of threat level. We must assume the artifact is not alone. That this sovereign is one piece in a greater arsenal. We know what humans did with their fleets. We know what they were willing to become during the final war. If this is the beginning..." Another voice interrupted, deep and deliberate. "The beginning of what?" asked Archon Drell of the Raythari conglomerate. His eyeless head swiveled toward Vevlar. "Justice? Rebellion? Or vengeance?" Strategist Vevlar narrowed her slitted eyes. "Recklessness, chaos, fire without reason." Speaker Tharn raised a glowing hand. "Enough. This is not the time for poetic paranoia. We need options." Behind the chamber, hidden far beneath the public halls of the Citadel, secure archives flickered to life. Files stamped "terminated" lit up one by one. Not by the Council's doing, but from the outside. The Sovereign had breached them, each file open, not to all, just to one man. A projection shimmered in the shadows of the chamber. An old video, grainy and distorted by time, of Captain Orion Kale giving a speech on a ruined battlefield. "We were built to break," he had said, "but when we break, we leave scars." The Council watched in horrified silence as more files played. Not just military strikes, countermeasures, traps, protocols designed to outlast Earth itself. Not for survival, for revenge. Speaker Tharn turned back to the room. "We cannot allow this sovereign protocol to spread. The humans were brilliant, yes, but they were monsters in the end. They encoded their extinction with knives. I motion for an emergency coalition. All member fleets will unite. We will isolate Veltrax, surround the system, and if necessary..." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Containment. Or annihilation. Far from the Citadel, aboard a small freighter in the Nabari wastes, a woman named Ash Weller wiped the dust off a panel marked with a forgotten insignia. The White Eagle of Earth. She'd been born in hiding, raised on the edge of forgotten space. Her mother had told her bedtime stories of Earth not as a planet, but as a ghost. A place that had lived in fire and died in silence. But the silence was over. The Sovereign's signal had reached her comms board 5 hours ago. A code so old and so buried it cracked open the encrypted systems her ship had carried without knowing. It didn't say much, just 2 words. "We return." Ash stared at it for a long time. Then she reached into the floor compartment where her mother had hidden a weapon she swore they'd never use again. A black rifle with a broken serial number. A Terran-made weapon. She lifted it, checked the chamber, and smiled. "We do." On Veltrax, the first dropships arrived. Trinaxis forces ordered to contain the site before the Sovereign expanded its reach. Relic hadn't waited for the Council vote. He knew better. He knew history. The last time the galaxy waited on bureaucracy, Earth burned. This time, he'd burn first. Hundreds of soldiers in black and blue armor touched down on the planet's surface. Plasma rifles, heavy walkers, sky-mounted drones. The ground thundered beneath their march. At the center of it all stood the Sovereign, silent and motionless, its crimson glow casting long shadows over the dust. Inside, Commander Kale stood at the observation window, arms folded, watching the troops gather. Beside him, Lyra Raines checked her rifle. "We going loud?" Kale didn't answer right away. He just placed his hand on the console. "Argent? Status? Hostile activity confirmed. Defensive threshold exceeded. Shall I engage?" Kale thought of Earth, of what was lost, of what had been taken. He nodded. "Let them know this world is already claimed." Outside, the Sovereign's shield flared like a heartbeat. Every alien weapon suddenly pulled to the left, metal bending, systems shorting. It wasn't a shield. It was a magnetized field, designed to distort electronics at the molecular level. Walkers collapsed. Drones fell like insects. Then from beneath the soil, the first of the Sovereign's defense units rose. They weren't machines. Not entirely. They were biomechs. Part armor, part bone, fused with cryopreserved Terran soldiers from the final days. Their movements were unnatural. Their eyes glowed with cold blue fire, and they didn't hesitate. They opened fire, no warning, no speeches, just precise, perfect retaliation. In the skies above, Trin ships began losing altitude as targeting systems failed. Entire battalions went silent as if some invisible switch had flipped off their will to fight. Marshal Relic watched in horror. "This is war," he muttered. It was worse. It was memory, alive again, walking, fighting, burning, and far above Veltrax, hidden behind cloaked satellites, the Council fleet began to move. They were too late. The Sovereign had awakened, and it had called for war. In the darkness between stars, the signal kept spreading. It crossed systems in hours, not days. Slipping through abandoned satellite networks, piggybacking on civilian comm relays, pulsing like a ghost heart through the ancient infrastructure of a species the galaxy had tried to erase. "We return." That was all the message said. But it was enough. On frontier worlds where no one wore the Terran flag anymore, the message sparked old fires. In scrapyard colonies, men and women who had spent their lives tearing apart human wrecks for spare parts suddenly stopped and listened. On prison moons where descendants of Earth's final soldiers lived in silence, tattoos on their arms, once considered shameful, now pulsed with new meaning. Everywhere, the broken pieces of a fallen species began to move. The rebellion didn't start with fleets or armies, and it started with remembrance. In the back alleys of Draxia City, a group of half-starved exiles hijacked a cargo shuttle and slammed it into a Dominion patrol post, shouting Earth's anthem through a cracked loudspeaker. On a forgotten trade station orbiting the gas giant Tyros 8, a bartender received the signal and quietly handed rifles to 3 regulars who hadn't said the word Terran aloud in 30 years. The rifles were old, the cause was older, and it didn't matter, because the galaxy had never seen what a war looked like when it was fought by memory. Back on Veltrax, the battlefield around the Sovereign had turned into something almost holy. Alien wreckage smoldered in neat piles. The ground was scorched but quiet, as if the planet itself was waiting. Above it all, the Black Tower stood untouched, its surface humming softly in the low wind, its glow steady. Inside, Commander Orion Kale reviewed footage from across the sector. Red dots marked each new broadcast of the Sovereign's code. At first, there had been 5, then 11. Then 23, and now more than 50 active signals blinked across the map, each one from a different system, each one repeating the same declaration. Sovereign active, awaiting orders. "They're responding," Lyra Raines said, stepping up behind him. Her voice held both awe and worry. "Some of them were buried deep, systems we thought were gone. How many are still out there?" Kale didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stared at the blinking lights, his face unreadable, his hands still. Then slowly he replied, "Enough." In the deep vacuum near the grave ring of Thassel, a Terran war frigate called the Black Fang roared to life for the first time in 200 years. Its hull was covered in asteroid scars, its engines older than most modern star drives, but its spirit was intact. The onboard AI, Alpha Naught, registered Sovereign Signal as a top priority protocol. And like a loyal hound answering a master's call, the Black Fang changed course toward Veltrax. Inside, Commander Jules Marrow, a war veteran sealed in cryo since the siege of Mars, woke with blood in her throat and fire in her eyes. "About damn time," she said, strapping herself into the pilot's seat. At the edge of Kyr Dominion space, a fleet of converted transport ships, refitted with salvaged weapons and Terran scrap armor, drifted into formation. Their leader, a man called Arcus Venn, had been a smuggler once, a traitor twice, but he had never forgotten the first face he watched burn when Earth fell. Now his ships bore no flags, only spray-painted symbols of the old Terran eagle rusted and cracked across their hulls. "We don't ask permission," he told his crew. "We don't ask forgiveness. We hit. We vanish. We let the galaxy remember what fear really smells like." They called themselves the Ghost Line, and soon systems the Council thought secure were lighting up in red. In a hidden corner of the galaxy, within the drifting ruins of a collapsed colony called Solaris Reach, something older than even the Sovereign stirred. Not a ship, not a base, a command AI, one of Earth's final experiments before its fall, designed not to lead battles but to resurrect them. It had no body and no voice, only code. But when the Sovereign's pulse reached it, the system came online. Its first act? Activate its database of cryo-locked fleet rosters. Its second? Begin transmission. Not just a message this time, a command directive. Terran Relay 217 online. Blood memory confirmed. Unit Echo class engaged. In every hidden vault, every buried depot, every ship forgotten beneath moons and wreckage, the Sovereign signal was no longer a whisper. It was an order, and humanity had always been good at following orders when the mission was clear. The Galactic Council's emergency broadcast lit up every known system within 100 parsecs. Ships were grounded, borders reinforced, curfews instated. Even worlds untouched by Terran history felt the chill creeping through the dark. "This is a coordinated terrorist resurgence," the broadcast declared, translated into every language the Council controlled. "Human artifacts must be reported. Terran symbols must be removed. Harboring Earth descendants is a violation of Council law. Sovereign-class signals must be jammed or isolated. We are not at war. Yet. But we must act before the galaxy forgets who commands it." But it was too late, because for the first time in centuries, someone else was commanding. On Veltrax, Kale stood at the edge of the Sovereign's central chamber. Below him, dozens of humans, some thawed from cryo, some broadcast in from hidden colonies, stood shoulder to shoulder in the war room. Soldiers, engineers, smugglers, strategists, ghosts of Earth's shattered past. And every single one of them was listening. Kale didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "We were never meant to survive," he said. "They built this galaxy on our bones. They paved our silence into their streets. And now they flinch when we speak." He stepped forward, his shadow long under the tower's light. "We won't beg, we won't wait. We will remind them." A murmur of approval rippled through the crowd, quiet, powerful. Lyra stepped beside him. "What's the next move?" Kale turned to the main console. The galaxy map was lit with red dots now. Not just signals, not just sparks. Fires. He pointed to the Council stronghold worlds. "Next," he said, "we take back what they stole." He didn't mean planets, and he meant fear. and humanity had just begun to teach the galaxy how to feel it again. The war didn't start with a declaration. It started with a decision. Orion Kale stood before the Sovereign's war map, a living mosaic of the galaxy, lines pulsing, systems glowing, enemy formations updating in real time. Red pulses marked Terran activity, blue marked Dominion outposts, green Council strongholds. But the colors didn't matter, because none of them had ever expected Earth to speak again. Now it wasn't just speaking, it was pointing. "We strike here," Kale said, tapping the holographic surface. A projection zoomed into a dense nebula called Theta Baris, a swirling patch of magnetic storms and stellar debris. Hidden within was Outpost Niveus, a Council-controlled weapons relay, home to the Defense Command node responsible for orbital sensors across 9 sectors. If it went dark, the Council would go blind. And that meant opportunity. Lyra Rains squinted at the projection. Niveus is heavily fortified, automated minefield, 3 dreadnoughts, no jump lanes unless you know the threading code. Kale gave her a small nod. "We do." "How?" He turned slightly. "Because we built it." Centuries ago, during the early expansion of the Galactic Council, humans had been forced to hand over dozens of core military systems after the Accords. They hadn't resisted. It was a calculated surrender. One that allowed the Terran Defense Corps to install layer code substructures inside major Council installations. Dead code, harmless, buried so deep no alien species could recognize it. Not until someone like Kale returned and told it to wake up. The Sovereign's AI, Argent, had already unlocked the fail-safe sequences for Niveus. The mining fields could be disabled, the targeting systems looped, the docking codes overridden. All they needed was a fleet, and they were finally getting one. On the edge of the Veltrax system, ship after ship emerged from Slipstream. Some were old Terran cruisers, their hulls scarred and patched with unfamiliar alloys. Others were cargo haulers rearmed with salvaged plasma batteries. A few had no names, only numbers and paint symbols. Skull emblems, eagle wings, scratched words like ashfall and memory across their flanks. And then there was the Vigilant, a Titan-class dread carrier believed destroyed at the fall of Vega 4, now resurrected by the crew of the Revenant and repaired piece by piece in the shadows of a dead moon. Its engines growled like an animal starved too long. It wasn't fast, it wasn't graceful, but it had one job: to remind. Captain Mara Lon, commander of the Vigilant, hailed Kale directly. Her face appeared on the Sovereign's deck hollow, scarred, serious, steady. "We're locked and ready," she said. "Just give the word." Kale nodded. "You'll have it soon." Inside the Sovereign's council chamber, representatives of every confirmed Terran colony, awakened, hidden, or scattered, were linked in through encrypted comms. These weren't politicians. There were no titles, no ranks. Only survivors, fleet captains, resistance leaders, children of those left behind. Kale stood before them, the galaxy map at his back. "You've all seen the Council's new decree," he said. "Containment, extermination, isolation. They call us a hazard. They say we are unstable, dangerous, violent." He stepped forward, voice low but clear. "They're right." A beat of silence. "We are dangerous because we remember, because we survived what they did, because we refuse to vanish." Across the encrypted line, a dozen nods, some grim, some hungry. "We don't rebuild to beg, we rebuild to bite." The operation was codenamed Cinder Echo, in honor of the last broadcast ever sent from Earth before it went dark. It wasn't a military anthem, not a threat. It had been a lullaby. A mother singing softly to her child in a bunker just before the Council's sterilization drones erased the entire region. Her voice had cut through jamming fields, encrypted by emotion, burned into Council archives so deep they couldn't erase it no matter how hard they tried. Now it was the call sign of the galaxy's most unpredictable fleet. The first Terran offensive in over 200 years. The fleet departed under the cover of an artificial eclipse created by a planetary-scale projector embedded in the Sovereign's tower. It bent light, blocked scans, and left the sky of Veltrax looking like night had arrived 2 hours early. Inside the command deck of the vigilant Maralon sat forward. "All ships, sync nav. Confirm vector lock on Niveus entry point. Keep shields down until breach. No alarms." Her crew nodded, silent, focused. This wasn't about battle. It was about making sure the first strike was perfect. At Outpost Niveus, life was normal. Council officers drank spiced nebula wine. Ships ran supply routes through the lanes. Sensor staff complained about static from the Barris storms. One technician even dozed off beside a half-functional radar array. None of them knew. None of them could imagine that already Terran subroutines had rewritten their command stack. None of them saw the 32 Terran ships sliding silently through the threading corridor, guided by ghost nav points Earth had buried centuries ago. Not until the lights flickered, and then it was too late. The attack lasted 7 minutes. The first target was the relay tower, taken offline by a single strike from the Ash Falls reconditioned railgun. The second was the sensor core, flooded with static and then detonated with a stealth mine planted by Terran infiltrators dropped in 10 minutes earlier. By the time the Vigilant decloaked and unleashed its main cannon, 2 of the Council's dreadnoughts were already drifting, dead in space, blind, deaf, and helpless. The third dreadnought tried to run. The memory caught it in a broadside burst of plasma fire, slagging its aft engine and sending it spiraling toward the gravity well of Barris's largest moon. Inside Outpost Niveus, alarms blared, but no one responded, because the first team to hit the station wasn't Council reinforcements. It was Kale's shock unit, old armor, brutal weapons, and zero mercy. By the time they reached the command spire, most of the garrison had either fled or surrendered. Commander Kale stepped over the Council commander's body, alive, bound, whimpering in a corner, and activated the station's primary transmitter. He faced the holocam, let it scan his face, then he spoke, broadcasting across 50 systems. "This is Commander Orion Kale of the Terran Sovereign Offensive. We do not come to negotiate. We come to collect." He turned slightly. Behind him, the Terran Eagle was projected against the wall, flickering but visible. "Let this burn into your eyes. Let it carve itself into your memory. You let Earth die. Now Earth is something else." He leaned forward, voice calm. "Earth is war." Then he cut the feed. In the Galactic Council chamber, Speaker Tharn watched in pale silence. Around him, his colleagues argued. Some crying out for diplomacy, others for genocide. Some begged for logic. But none of them could ignore the truth now. The humans weren't extinct, they weren't forgotten, and they had just proved that they could strike anywhere. No permission, no warning, and just precision and fury. Speaker Tharn, for the first time in his century-long rule, felt something he hadn't known since the day Earth fell. Fear. Council forces reeled in the wake of the attack on Outpost Niveus. They had expected chaos. They had prepared for scattered uprisings. But they had not prepared for strategy, for unity, for war planned with the memory of 1,000 injustices. Within days, 3 more Terran fleets emerged across separate sectors. The Black Fang, Revenant, and Sledgehammer initiated coordinated strikes, not on military targets, but on archives, supply vaults, command uplinks. They weren't taking territory, they were taking power, cutting the strings that held the Council together. And soon, those strings began to snap. In the neutral system of Aerolus Prime, where peace was supposedly negotiated, the Council gathered for one last emergency vote. But the seats were half empty. The Kier Dominion refused to answer summons. The Uvier delegation had fled after its core world was firebombed by unknown Terran raiders. Even the Trin Axis, once the Council's fiercest arm, had retreated into silence after the Sovereign's secondary broadcast fried every one of their command servers. The Council, for all its grandeur, was crumbling, piece by piece, vote by vote, until all that remained were voices shouting into a storm no longer listening. Back on Veltrax, in the heart of the Sovereign Tower, Commander Orion Kale watched the feed flicker to static. The last of the Council's unity, gone. "They won't come back together," Lyra said, stepping beside him. Her armor was scorched, her face bruised, but her voice held that same sharp calm. "They can't." Kale nodded once. "That's the point." The Sovereign's core hummed softly around them. Its glow was lower now. Diamond Soy's not dying, resting. Its purpose was never to rule, only to remind. And it had. Aboard the Vigilant, Captain Maralon received the final encoded burst from Terran Command. Initiate terminal signal. She stood silently on the bridge, watching stars crawl past the viewport. Across the galaxy, hundreds of old Earth-built artifacts, towers, beacons, bunkers, vaults, received the same command. Not to fight, not to strike, to shut down. One by one, the ghost machines of humanity went quiet, not because they had failed, but because their message had been delivered. 2 weeks later, the Sovereign Tower sealed itself. Its turrets retracted, its lights dimmed, its command deck went dark. And in the valley below, human soldiers gathered not for battle, but for departure. Orion Kale stood at the base of the structure, looking up one last time. "You sure about this?" Lyra asked him. He gave her a small, tired smile. "We won?" She didn't reply at first, just stared into the distance where the first of the Terran ships were lifting off. "Yeah," she said softly. "I guess we did." Across the galaxy, the scars of the Terran return could not be hidden. Council propaganda collapsed. Galactic markets fell into panic. Alliances built on Earth's silence unraveled in real time. And for the first time in generations, billions of non-human citizens whispered the name of a species they had forgotten. Humans. Not extinct, not begging, just present. And forever part of the stars again. In the outer systems, hidden from charts, a Terran colony ship called Arclight landed on a fresh, untouched world. Forests stretched to the horizon, skies ran deep blue. The planet had no name, so they gave it one. New Earth, not a replacement, not a copy, a beginning. Orion Kale never saw it. He chose to stay behind, one of the last on Veltrax. Not as a general. Not even as a soldier, just a man standing beside the tomb of a world that refused to stay dead. In his final message, broadcast only to surviving Terran colonies, Kale's voice was quiet. "No more vengeance, no more ghosts. We fought so they'd remember us. Now it's our turn to live." He looked up at the stars. And for once they looked back. Epilogue. Years passed, then decades. The Sovereign stayed silent. The Council never truly recovered. Their power shrank, their systems fractured, and in the cracks of that collapse, new worlds were born. Places where human and alien lived without fear of one another. Where war wasn't a default setting, where the past stayed remembered, but didn't rule the present. In a museum on New Earth, children gathered around an old piece of dark alloy. A teacher tapped on its black surface and smiled. "This," she said, "is a piece of the Sovereign, the tower that changed the galaxy." A little girl raised her hand. "Was it a weapon?" The teacher shook her head. "No," she said, "it was a memory, one that refused to die.